our denomination uses a phrase that I actually love, and the phrase is this: it's in essentials unity, in non-essentials charity, in all things Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And it's how do we as believers keep a united front in a divided culture? Jesus said that others would know that we are his disciples by our love. How does that work when everything is so heated? This is Season 2, Episode 34 of Unhurried. I'm your host, Doug Kyle. Ryan alongside of me in the studio. And we're getting into it. Our next episode here. This is unusual, though. First time we've recorded in the evening.
Yes.
We always record in the morning, but we are here late night. Not that late, but kind of later night at the church recording. No one's here.
I know.
The place is empty. But it just in our schedules, this is really the only time we could do it.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I'm kind of bummed that I'm not, sipping on a warm cup of coffee or like a tea or something, right now, but it's chill. I got my water.
Yeah. You're on your way to play hockey too.
I am actually on my way. Yeah. And I get like nervous too, before I play. Yeah. So, which is funny. I don't get nervous before I play music. But I get nervous
before you play hockey.
Before I play hockey, so I don't want to eat anything. I don't want to drink anything other than water. So
I was a little nervous before doing the podcast, so I didn't want to eat anything. So I didn't have dinner. I'm gonna have a late night dinner.
Oh
when we
man,
get home.
that is
You'll
late.
be playing hockey. I'll be having dinner.
Yeah.
But this will take your mind off hockey.
Yes, it will. Which is good.
Yeah, we'll take all the nerves out because you'll just be talking, and suddenly, if you win tonight. If you have the game of your life, then we got to do this podcast every time before your game.
Yeah, I was this sounds so silly, and if I say this, my wife is going to be rolling her eyes, but it's fine. There was a time, a season ago, maybe even two. I think it was actually last season, where I had scored 3 goals. Okay, in the first game of the season, but I had gone and got a protein shake from like a local farm, like market, Fraser Farms. It's in North County, Vista area. Yeah. And I had gotten a protein shake and I scored 3 goals that night.
And you thought that was a secret.
And so I was like, well, the next week I have to do the same thing. Yeah. And so I kept on scoring like 2 to 3 goals a game for like a whole season. And I was like, it's got to be the protein shakes. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then so every time on the way home before we'd head off to the rink, I was like, I have to go get a protein shake. You know what I mean? So yes, if I score 3 goals tonight.
Yeah, we're doing the podcast.
We are now doing the Unhurried podcast at night.
Right before your game.
Yes. Now,
wait, why is your wife going to be mad about telling that story?
Because not mad. I mean, it's just, because she laughs because she says the way that I talk and the way that I talk to my friends about our games, we would, if you look at the conversations or hear the conversations, you'd be like, oh wow, this guy's in the NHL. And we're playing adult recreation league at Kit Carson, in Escondido.
Ouch. Wow. Hey, you got to take it seriously. You got to,
I think so. I feel like in life there's just like a few things you just got to kind of take a little serious. It's a hobby, it's fun. And then I always tell my wife too, I'm like, if you can get 6 to 8 guys or 6 to 8 people, let's just say 6 to 8 people to do something every single week together. Yeah. I feel like you have won at life. You've won. Yeah. Right? Like you've got 8 people that want to do the same thing that you want to do. Yeah. You've won. Whether it's hockey or kickball or bunko or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is,
you've won at life. Yeah. You've won.
Yeah. Good point.
All right.
Good point. All right. Well, we'll see. If we start having this every evening from now on, you'll know how Ryan's doing in hockey. I almost did. I can't wait for the listener question. Okay. At the end. I can't wait. It's like, I think it might be my favorite one.
Oh my gosh.
And I wanted to do it early. Sure. But if I did it early, we would be so self-conscious the rest of the podcast. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but the question alone is going to make us so self-conscious.
Is it from somebody that we know?
It's from somebody we know and someone who maybe is picking up on some mannerisms that, it's not like I speak for a living. Wait. Anyway,
Wait,
they
yes.
want they
Yes.
just anyway.
Yes.
You'll see what I mean.
It's like when I try and like hum a song, but I don't really know the song, right?
Mhm.
Like, so I'm kind of like trying to figure out what song it is, you
Yeah.
know, and I kind of like ask Mandy, like, do you know this song? Or like, is this a song or something like that? And she's like, I can never tell when you do that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, cool. It's not like I'm a musician for a living.
Right.
You know what I mean? Oh, sweet. Like, you can
Nice.
never tell when
Yeah.
I do that, you know? So I'm like, oh, that makes me feel really good.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, the listener question, if you're, as you're following along, you definitely, if you have time to listen all the way through the listener question, it is worth it. But today I want to kind of pick up, we're going to do a series here for the next 4 weeks. We're going to be looking at just what it means to crush it in community.
Yeah.
And the value of being together in community. We're looking at Philippians chapter 4, which is really a great place to kind of talk about what it means to do life together as believers side by side. And there's such a emphasis these days and such a tendency, maybe a temptation to kind of become independent in your spiritual walk and just kind of do it on your own. And this series is going to really bolster the idea that life together is how God's designed it.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the threats to our life together and then talk about the opposite. So we kick it off this week. We're talking about division. And of course, the remedy for that is unity, of being together. And how do we find unity among believers in a divisive world? And Philippians 4 starts off with a great example from their life together. And Paul calls out two women, Euodia and Syntyche. He calls them out because there was a disagreement. He never tells us what it was, but he gives them a prescription for remedying it. And to me, I mean, can you imagine their names are forever recorded in the annals of Scripture because of the tension, the conflict, the disagreement, or whatever the problem was between them. But to me, that tells me how much God values that He's willing to address it directly with them for us for centuries, ever since we can learn from their example.
Right. And I love that because you mentioned this, earlier today, and then you mentioned it right now, that we don't know what Paul so wisely, I think, left out the issue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you can apply it to today.
Right.
And you even said that, I think, earlier today too, where you're like, he didn't say what it was so that we can then insert, I think that's what you said earlier.
Yeah,
you said
insert your own issue
there
here.
you go. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way you said that. I thought it made me chuckle a little bit because I was like, it's so true. It's like he so wisely didn't say what it was.
I have to give Cindy credit for that.
Did you?
Yeah, because here's what happens. Here's on Sunday she picks up cold brew for church, and I'm in the passenger seat, and I'm just kind of mumbling through my notes.
Sure.
But then she comes back in the car. She's got the cold brew, and usually there's like a few, maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 minutes on the way to church. Sure. She gets the middle of my message.
Right.
And for some reason at that point I'm ready to kind of say it out loud, and she's listening to it. So from the drive between cold brew, and I was at that part.
Right.
And I said, we don't know what the disagreement was. Paul didn't, maybe it's not important for us to know. Right. And then she goes, and she just laughed. And she said, yeah, so we can insert our own problem into it. I go, ooh.
Well, there you go.
I go, that's good. Yeah. I'm writing that in right now. So, yeah, Cindy gets credit for that.
That is
one.
awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
So, yeah, insert your own issue here.
Yeah.
Because we can apply it to whatever it is. So, anyway,
good.
How do we find unity? And especially these days in such a divisive world, how do we find unity among believers? I mentioned earlier, just in the opening, that Jesus said that we would be known by our love. I'll give you the verse exactly. In John 13:35, he said, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love. But that's not all he said. He said, if you love one another, talking about fellow disciples.
Yeah.
And so, yes, believers should be known for their love for everyone, love for the world. God loved the world. We should love the world too. But uniquely, the way we treat each other and we love each other should stand out as a testimony in our world. And to me, that's a hard challenge these days. It's hard to do that. And we need to be reminded all the time that that unity is a testimony.
Mhm.
It's really a testimony the way we love one another. Now, love doesn't mean that we overlook everything, but the way we treat one another, whether we're being caring or confrontational or anything in between, is an expression of love.
Yeah.
It has to come out of love and has to come out of a shared unity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I often say that about my family, is that, my mom, like your mom too, is very, very devout,
Yep.
Christian, and
Yep.
instilled those values into our family. And we always go back to that, so whatever, families are messy sometimes and they can be difficult sometimes, but we always bring it back to the cross. You know what I mean? We lay our burdens down at the altar and we say, listen, we might have a difference on this, but the one thing we're not divided on is the grace of God. You know what I mean? And so that always pulls us back together, So, yeah.
Great point. Well, let's unpack that a little bit. What does it mean to be unified in a divisive world? Our denomination uses a phrase that I actually love, and the phrase is this: it's in essentials unity, in non-essentials charity, in all things Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And it's sort of been described as the ethos of our movement, and it really gives us, that phrase. It gives us three guiding principles. Some beliefs are essential. They're kind of core to us as believers. They're part of what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, and we need to be united around those things. Those are non-negotiable. And so I want to be clear when I talk about unity that unity isn't just accepting everything carte blanche. There are essentials that we need to say these are core and critical to what it means to be a faithful Christian.
Yeah.
But so that's the first part of the saying, in essentials, unity. That which is essential, we need to be unified around. But it goes on to say, in non-essentials, charity, which is, an old-fashioned way of talking about love. Mm-hmm. In non-essential things, we need to be loving towards one another. Other beliefs are non-essential. They're secondary. They're disputable. They're less central. And as believers, we should allow for freedom to differ on those areas and be loving in the way we treat one another. Paul was, I love there's an expression in the New Testament where Paul talks about some people honor the Sabbath as one day above the rest. Other people treat every day like the Sabbath. He's talking about the New Testament understanding of the Old Testament Sabbath. And then he adds this, he goes, let every person be fully convinced in their own mind, which he allowed for believers to land differently, and not only land differently, but be convinced differently about these secondary issues.
Right.
Saying this isn't critical. You can treat it this way. You could treat it that way.
Right.
That's okay. We're still the same family. And so in non-essentials, we need charity. And then I love the final phrase, in all things Jesus Christ. All things need to be governed by Jesus. And so what I think that's what we need to understand is unity. We need to be unified around that which is core. We need to be loving and gracious towards those that are not core issues, that there's freedom to land in different places, and in all things we're governed by Jesus. We're led by Him. We don't know where that expression came from. I tried to look it up a little bit to find who first said that. Some people take it all the way back to Augustine. We do know that around 1626, a German Lutheran theologian, a guy named, he had a great name, Rupertus Meldenius.
Man.
Rupertus Meldenius.
Why didn't I think of that for my son's name?
Rupertus. I had one of my earliest memory of a stuffed animal I had was named Rupert.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Rupert.
Yeah.
So this is Rupertus.
There you go.
That's
I like
the
that.
Latin version of Rupert,
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. He said this in the 17th century. He said, if we might keep in necessary things unity, in non-necessary things freedom, and in both charity, our affairs would certainly be in the best condition. That's probably where our phrase that I mentioned earlier came from what he was saying. And I guess believers have been kind of wrestling with this over the years, that in necessary things we need to be unified. In what he calls non-necessary things, there's freedom. But I love that he adds in both charity.
Mm-hmm.
We need love in both.
Right.
We need to be loving in those things we're unified around, and we need to be loving in those things that we differ on.
Right.
We would be in the best condition, he said, if we would do that.
Right.
Now there's even as I say that, there's tension among believers on what is essential and what is not essential. That's always, been debatable over the years. Is this essential or is this non-essential? And I understand that.
Yeah.
There's what counts as essential. Different people in different churches are going to draw that line in different places. But let's at least ask the question, is this really essential?
Yeah.
So many of the things that we have conflict over with other believers, we have to be honest and say this is not a core issue.
Yeah.
This is not essential.
Right.
This is not the difference between making it to heaven and not. And if we at least ask the question, we're going to be way better served to say, if it's not an essential thing, then we need to be gracious and charitable towards one another.
Yeah. In college, I took a class, and in the class, I want to say it was like pretty early on in the semester. There was like a page, and it had, 30 or 40 questions, and it was anonymous, and it was all these things of, what are considered to be essential and non-essential, right? And so then at the end, like by the next, class, the professor had put up all of the things that we had voted on as a class.
Oh, interesting.
As essential. And then all the ones that were non-essential. And then all of the other ones that were like on the bubble of not, had one or two votes or things like that. Yeah. And it was all of these, all these things, you know what I mean? Yeah. All the questions that you would have in the Bible, it was that, right? Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting because he then opened it up and said, if anybody wants to debate what is voted as non-essential and say you voted for it to be essential, he's like, let's start a discussion, But it was cool to see how everyone in that college classroom would have said, yes, of course I profess my belief in Jesus and he rose from the grave, and you know what I mean? It was like all the things that you would consider to be, these are, essential orthodox to our,
these are core.
And then everything else was up for debate, and it was really interesting. And like, I still think about that even today when I run into other Christians or I have other friends that work at different churches and different denominations. It's like, I always think about that class and that professor on like how clever that was to kind of get down to the nitty gritty of what we really believe.
I think in our heart of hearts, we know what those essentials are. Most people, and there are, I get it. There's some things that are debatable, and there's, like you say, on the bubble.
Sure.
And let's allow for that. But so many of the things that we divide ourselves over are so far from anything we would say this is a make it or break it, critical belief,
thing. Right,
to getting into heaven,
right, and that's what he was trying to show in the class, where it's like we get stuck on these other things that you think are essential, but they're not. Mm-hmm. They're debatable, sure, but not essential to our core belief.
So in essentials, unity, and non-essentials, love or charity. In all things, Jesus Christ. And I love that ending, and I think that is kind of unique to our denomination, in all things, Jesus Christ. But I like bringing it back to him because he is the Lord and the leader of our lives, and he's growing us and changing us. So that allows for the fact that we're not there yet.
Right.
We're still on this growth pattern with him, and so we can allow people a little bit of grace to be still figuring some of the things out.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, very much so.
Well, a listener asked after today's message, so I think we kind of alluded to that, but this is Sunday night. Yeah. We're sitting. We just talked about this morning, so it's crazy. But a listener asked her, and I love this. It's the first time she wrote in to our email. But she started long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, that's awesome! I love that.
a funny way to put it.
That is funny.
She said she's excited about the new series, and she thought things were, she connected with a few things. But then she said this. This is her question. She said, it's hard to connect with those who call themselves followers of Christ when their words and actions are completely the opposite of what we read in the Word. What advice do you have for those of us who are having a hard time reconciling this? And then she ended, thanks for listening. And of course, I love the show. So that's awesome. So I'm going to, this is not the listener question. This is just something that is critical to what we're talking about tonight. I think, I appreciate that comment because that's a real struggle. I mean, that really expresses, I think, how many of us feel and how often we feel that way. The response I think we need to think about to that is that the truth is that none of us live out our faith perfectly. None of us are there. And so if that's true of us, it's going to be true of those that we encounter. Yeah. We all have blind spots. We all have inconsistencies. We all have areas in our life that we've just completely overlooked. The proverb says that it is wise to overlook an offense. Sometimes there's those things that you go, you know what, that's just a blind spot in their life, and I'm going to overlook that. I felt that recently when I was around a believer, and I could just see something that was just kind of starting to really rub me the wrong way, because I go, that is not, the way a believer should respond. Sure. But I think it was just a blind spot. Yeah. It wasn't intentional. It was just an area. And I go, I bet I have a bunch of those. I mean, not bet. I know I have a bunch of those things as well. This doesn't excuse hypocrisy or blatant sin. I'm not saying we're meant to overlook that. But it does remind us that Jesus came to offer us his grace and to save us from those things. Yeah. And he didn't come because we've got it all together. So what do we do when we're in that situation like this listener expresses? As much as possible, I think we extend patience and grace while still holding fast to the truth ourselves. We shouldn't change us, and we should be a testimony and we should be a light, but we should also realize that they could be a person in process as well. We don't ignore the sin, but we choose to love just like Christ loved us when we were people in process as well. The Bible is clear on this. There's times when it gets so severe, when the situation is so difficult, that we need to remove ourselves from it. We need to break contact with that individual. And the Bible does address that and say that clearly. So if it is severe, there are times when that's the case. If it is that negative in your life, you should remove yourself from the individual. But we always do it with the hope of reconciliation. We always do it with the hope that this relationship could be restored. We always do it out of love. Love sometimes is tough love, and sometimes it means closing the door or removing ourselves or protecting ourselves or creating a buffer between you and that person. But you're not doing it because you're mad at them or I can't stand what they're doing. You're doing it because out of love. Love says that this needs to happen. Yeah. So that's part of it. But even then, you love them, even if you don't adopt their ways. If it's harmful, then you may need to separate yourself or those you love from them. I really love the way 2 Timothy 2:24-26 puts it, and I've quoted this often with people over the years in counseling situations. It says, "The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but must be kind to everyone, able to teach, not resentful. Opponents must be gently instructed in the hope that God will grant them repentance, leading them to the knowledge of the truth, and that they will come to their senses and escape the trap of the devil who has taken them captive to do his will." There's a very, serious description of someone who's kind of departed from the faith, a believer. But even then, where it's meant to be kind and teaching and praying and hoping that they will be reconciled. Yeah. I as you were saying that, I was kind of, some people were brought to my mind, and the reconciliation, I think, is the part where we want to shield ourselves, we want to shield, our family or our well-being, and we sometimes forget the part of the reconciliation. And that's the part that I think even in my own life, I'm kind of getting back to being a little bit older, I think, a little bit more mature, and getting to the place of reconciliation and knowing that we're bumpy. We got scars, we've got edges, we've got things that are going on that, may not be us at our best, but we can say there's been some distance now, but now we can start to,
bring things back together,
Yeah, I think that happens with all of us as we talk about these things, as we deal with these hard realities of Scripture, like how do we find unity in these broken and hard relationships. People come to mind, situations come to mind, and that's good. That's how the Spirit is reminding us that this stuff is still relevant today.
Right.
It still plays really well in today's culture. It's stuff that we need to be thinking about and implementing ourselves. I love that this passage, helps us see that we can be a part of the healing. We can be a part of the change. So the Bible doesn't call us to be soft on sin. Unity isn't soft on sin.
Right.
It's just, first of all, humble about our own shortcomings, and then secondly, you want to be a part of the remedy. You want to be, if ideally, you can be a part of the help for them. Once you deal with the log in your own eye, you can help with the speck in your brother's eye too. So we all can be a part of the process of change. But the question is hard when it's really blatant, when it's really hard. The Bible does say that it's okay to remove yourself for a season if that's the only way you can protect yourself or your family. But if you cannot, even that's out of love. It's love for them and love for those you care about. It can be discouraging when you see it, but there's something in us that calls us to extend the kind of grace that we ourselves have seen along the way. This morning when I was talking, I said that I would be talking a little bit on the podcast about spending eternity in heaven together. If we're going to be in heaven together with them, that should at least change the conversation a little bit. That should at least inform the way we think about them, the way we feel about them, and the way we treat those disagreements. Yeah. We don't necessarily, overlook the disagreements. Sure. But we rise above them with realizing what's even more important than the disagreement. We can still deal with it, but we're dealing it now from the perspective of the unity and the forever life that we're going to have with them in heaven. There's an old joke. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It seems like it goes around all the time, and it's always meant to make fun of a certain denomination. And I'm not going to do that. Make fun.
I was hoping you were going. No,
you thought you were hoping I was going to. No, I'm not going to call out any denomination. But it's like if there's a certain group that people know, and you always just want to make fun of whatever group it is that treats themselves like they're the only ones that have it all figured out. Right. Like their perspective is the only correct perspective. Right. Nobody else has it right except for them. Yeah. And there's, over the centuries, there's been groups of believers like that. The joke goes like this. A man dies, goes to heaven. St. Peter is giving him a grand tour. They walk past one room, and Peter says, "Oh, that's all the Methodists in there. See how they love the hymns, and they're singing all these hymns in there." And then they walk past another room. He goes, "There's the Baptists. They're enjoying their potlucks. They're having food and enjoying their potlucks." And then they always come to a closed-off section, and Peter whispers, goes, "Shh, be quiet," as they're passing this one. And the man goes, "Why is that?" Because this is where you insert whatever denomination you want to make fun of. This is the such and such denomination. They think they're the only ones here, and that's the way it goes. You make fun of it that way, but there's something about that we tend to, when we get self-righteous in our own perspective, we're acting like we're the only ones that are going to be in heaven. Right. Like
we get very hive mind, like where you can kind of like, you kind of all talk the same or think the same, and you're like, oh, well, this has to be, it's our way. Like this is the right way,
and you got to read these, you got to follow it to the letter, every bullet point you need to be lockstep with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. For sure. And chances are, reality is we all have blind spots, and I think Billy Graham said when we get to heaven, we're going to be surprised who's there. Right. Because, and people will be surprised we're there maybe, it's like we get there, it's like, I didn't realize, our eyes will be opened. Right. It says we'll see things clearly. Now we see things through a glass, faintly. Then we're going to see things clearly as they are, and we'll understand the things that we were confused about, and yet we got in by grace,
Right.
not by having everything figured out.
Right.
And
Right.
others have put their faith in Christ, and they'll be there, even though they didn't dot the I and cross the T like we do.
Mm-hmm.
So don't draw the circle too tightly. If we're
Yeah.
going to be in heaven together, then let's give grace towards those who may land differently than us.
Yeah.
Larry Osborne, who I'm going to quote him again. So he and C.S. Lewis are the two people keeping track of. So here's a Larry Osborne quote, but he said this, years ago, and I wrote it down and think about it often. He says, "You don't get to heaven on a Scantron. You get to heaven with a blood test."
Nice.
And, a Scantron, for those who don't know what that is, that's an old-fashioned way of taking tests where, you would just fill in the bubble and answer all the questions, and, you get graded on the test. We don't get in with a, 100-page, or 100-question essay, true, false,
Right.
multiple choice, and we got to get them all right.
Right.
Or 90%, okay, good
Right.
enough, you get in.
Right.
We get in with a blood test.
Yeah.
We get in because
Yeah.
Jesus died for us. That's
Mhm.
why we're there. He died for us even in when we didn't have it all figured out.
Right.
I think about what I understood about Jesus when I was a brand new Christian at
Mhm.
14 years old.
Yeah.
Very little.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
If you would have given me the 100-question true or false, who knows? I
Who
would
knows
have
what
done
happened?
pretty poorly. I wouldn't even half the words I wouldn't even know what they meant.
I feel like at 38 years old, I feel like I would still score very poorly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Fortunately, it's not about having all the answers.
Right.
It's
Right.
about,
Right.
there are core beliefs that we commit to, but that at the end of the day,
Yeah.
those core beliefs are centered around Jesus, his
Yeah.
sacrifice for us,
Yes.
and what he died for us, and
Mhm.
understanding his
Mhm.
grace to us, his shed blood on our behalf. It's
Yes.
a blood test,
Yes.
not a Scantron. And so,
Yes.
as I kind of talked about in the message today, that's why grace is so important. Grace towards ourselves and grace towards others
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah.
Again, unity doesn't mean overlooking sin or overlooking false truth, false positions or false teaching, but it does allow us to have a ground to view them from. And
Mhm.
even if we have to address them and confront them, we do it out of a position of love and unity,
Yeah.
trying to be restored and reconciled,
Yeah.
rather than from a position of just writing them off and,
Right.
and severing the cord.
Right. Right. Yeah. I had a conversation with someone a few years ago, and even further back from that, there were just some things where, I wasn't at my best, and, he wasn't at his best. But he called me out of the blue and just said, "Hey, I just want to kind of hash this out, and I just want to say that I'm sorry for the part that I played, in all of this kind of situation that happened." And it still stayed with me. You know what I mean? Because I just go like, he could have just left it and we could have just moved on and realized that, hey, you know what? We were both prickly at this time, and that's it. But he didn't. You know what I mean? And I just look at my life, and I look at my situations that have gone on in my life, and I go, if I ever at a place, I hope I'm not, but if I ever am a place where I'm prickly and someone else is prickly, I would hope that I would have the foresight or the grace to remind myself that someone did that for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That he showed Christ in that moment where he realized, like I said, we were both prickly, but he realized that he was like, you know what, we're gonna get rid of this. You know what I mean? It was a stain on both of our lives, and I'm gonna clean this up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I commend him for that.
Yeah,
Like,
super admirable.
Yeah.
It's super admirable, and it was motivated out of love, no
Yes,
doubt.
no
doubt. Priority of unity.
Yes.
Say unity is more important than the issue
Right.
that divided us that day or
Right.
whatever
right.
it was. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And I just look, and I so far I haven't had to make any of those phone calls, so I'm doing okay. But I think about that often when something happens in life, and I try and squash it as fast as possible.
That's super good. Super good. Well, hopefully this takes us a little step further into the discussion of how do we champion unity in a day that's so divisive, especially among believers. If it's true that what Jesus said, that that this world will know we're his disciples the way we love one another, then we need to take it as seriously as Jesus did.
Yeah.
And let love lead the way for us on these things.